they're not responsible, that the situation is really something that they couldn't control, then you're more likely to feel sympathy and then help them, or not aggress, not punish them. They found this in many different ways. So they found this in terms of reactions to stigma, like looking at handicaps and things like that, whether you're an alcoholic, whether you're a drug addict, or if you're physically handicapped in some way. These attributions can really change people's responses. They've also looked at things like responses to the O.J. Simpson trial, whether or not he should have been punished. And then they've looked especially at teachers because they're a really good area for research. Okay. Another guy named Daniel Batson, he's at Kansas, I believe, studies what he calls the altruism hypothesis, and he believes pretty seriously that, yes, we help others because we want to help others, and it's not a selfish thing, it's really about them. But a lot of people disagree with him, so he's built a whole career trying to prove this. So he wants to know, do people really help to alleviate others' suffering? Or when we alleviate someone else's suffering, is it really just because we want to alleviate our own suffering? So are you just giving money to the guy on the street because you want to feel better about yourself, right? Or because you just want him to leave you alone and not bother you anymore? So these are actual hypotheses that have been tested, not with that exact paradigm. He believes that when you feel sympathy, true sympathy, then what's happening is you help the other person in order to help them. It's this altruistic motivation. But the other part I mentioned to you about distress or fear or even disgust leads to this thing called personal distress. Basically, when I see you suffering, suddenly I get really focused on myself, and I get all sort of, my heart rate goes up, I get really freaked out, and I want to get out of the situation. And so he created this really cool study where, let's see, okay, participants watched another student receive painful electric shocks. They did fake this, it wasn't for real. So imagine you go into a study and they say, okay, for this study, you're going to watch someone else receive shocks. Okay. Then what they did was, after watching 2 rounds of shocks, it became very clear that the person being shocked was in a lot of distress, like not necessarily pain, but psychological distress. And she confessed that as a child, she had an experience where she was electrically shocked, and this was sort of bringing up those memories, and she was really not responding well to this experiment, and she would prefer to not go on. At this point, the experimenter said, well, if you want, you can trade places with her, and you can take the shocks for her. And there were 2 conditions. In what he calls the easy escape condition, if you say no, you don't have to stick around and watch the rest of the experiment. You can leave. In the hard escape condition, you have to sit there and watch her take all the rest of the shocks. Okay? So they measured how many shocks participants actually offered to take, and they measured 2 emotional feelings. This is just self-reports. And people didn't know that they were tapping into these separate things. They answered one list of emotions, which included these emotions plus some others, but he finds that they actually predict different things. So these compassion words, sympathy, they're moved, they're feeling compassionate, that predicts different things than does feeling grieved or upset or worried. Okay, so what they find is that the people who feel more compassion and the people who feel more distress, in the difficult and easy escape condition, people who feel compassion stay and help. That you would expect, right? Whether they're doing it for themselves or the other person, you'd expect them to stay and help, both when they're forced to watch and when they're not forced to watch. In the distress condition, or the people who feel more distress, sorry, in the difficult escape condition, they offer to help. So either you can offer to take a lot of shocks, or you can sit here and watch this poor woman take all these shocks. Then they say, okay, I'll help. But if you offer them the chance to leave, they leave. So what they do is they take much fewer shocks for the other woman, and they just are like, I'm out of here. I can't take this situation. So what he's trying to show here is that there's actually different emotional responses. We all tend to feel both emotional responses, but if you feel more compassion, you're going to help. And if you feel more distress, you're probably going to try and run. Unless you're not allowed to, and then you will help. Okay. I mentioned that psychology approaches sympathy and compassion as a coherent emotional response. This is just to kind of let you know what's out there. There have also been a lot of research like this with children, and they found that they have very similar responses to adults. So it's something that you kind of get at very early in life. You kind of get to this point, and it's something that children can respond differently, even without reflecting on it sort of in a conscious way. Like they can't say, oh, I'm feeling compassion or I'm feeling distress, but they do have facial expressions and bodily responses that predict different outcomes. And what we find in general is that sympathy looks a lot like sadness. So what happens is you feel calmer, your heart rate goes down, and things like your skin conductance actually goes down. Skin conductance is a measure of how much blood flow you have in your extremities. When you feel fear, you have a lot of blood flow to your extremities. Remember I said it helps you to run? What you find is that in compassion, that actually goes away. So they think it's sort of like the opposite of fear, or the opposite of distress. And basically, lowered heart rate and lowered skin conductance, basically, you seem much calmer. Even though the other person is in a lot of distress, you're able to deal with the situation. Recently, there's been a few pieces of research that find that there are actually neural correlates. This is not my area of research, but what they find is that it's very similar to other emotion processing regions. And they also find that the areas that deal with theory of mind or perspective taking are also a part of this. So that cognitive piece of perspective taking shows up when you do neuroscience studies. In addition, there's been some really recent work on what's called mirror neurons, and what they find is that not just in humans, but in other primates, when mimicking or watching someone else do something, even just a motor movement, your brain will actually sort of trigger those same exact neurons. So there is some sort of thing here where it's almost like we really are perspective taking, like we're almost putting ourselves in their place, but it's happening in our mind. Obviously, there must still be something different happening because we're not going through the same situation as them, and we are keeping this separation. And that's what's yet unclear, is sort of how this is different from something like vicarious sadness. Okay, it's consistent with adults. Okay, so as I told you, many emotions that have been studied already across many different cultures have recognizable facial expressions. So it's likely that if we evolve these emotions, that the expressions associated with them are recognizable across many different cultures. Some good examples of this are fear, anger, happiness, sadness. They're ones that you guys probably can think of pretty quickly. But it's still unclear whether compassion has a facial expression. I was kind of wondering if you guys thought it might have one, or if so, what? Yeah. So maybe it would look like sadness. That's interesting. So you could look like a mirroring. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So you're saying that by feeling compassion or sympathy, you might know sort of what's best for the person, and anger might be the best response. Right. Right. Interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. It's an interesting distinction. I think we can talk about it in a little bit. Is what is the scientific study of compassion the same as what's being talked about, like in your class or in Buddhism? It's a good question. Were there any other comments? Well, something I want to point out, a couple things. One, I want to ask another question is, do you think that, so if there is sort of an innate response, how do you think culture might play into that? So do you expect all cultures to show compassion the same way, if it is there? So can you... Uh-huh. Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, definitely. Uh-huh. Okay, yeah. So it sounds like, at least so far, in terms of culture might play in terms of the situation, how you construe the situation. What do you think about the expression itself? So if, say you get past that part, and you feel compassion. Is everyone going to show it the same way? Why? Yeah. Right. That's called display rules, actually. A lot of cultures have rules about what you should show and what you shouldn't show. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see a kid walking down the street with no shoes. To me, that's very upsetting. To them, no one has any shoes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Okay. Well, there were a few comments. A couple of which I want to highlight. So it sounds a little cavalier, but it's not. I've always wondered if the aw response is like that feeling. Like you guys, I heard it. Not everyone. Probably it was a few more female voices. I don't want to stereotype, but to the dog with the gas mask. So that aw. I mean, that response is kind of freaky how much you hear it. I don't know. I've lived in other cultures, and I honestly don't remember hearing it, but I wasn't listening for it. So who knows? Uh-huh. Really? All right. Right. Okay. All right, so our working theory is that's a purely American thing. That's fine with me. Something else I wanted to point out, though, is that sympathy, as opposed to empathy, is very much a response to sadness or pain. So what you said about mirroring the other's response, I think is true. But I think that with sympathy, since it's about sadness and pain, our facial expression often ends up looking like sympathy or pain. Like sadness or pain. So what we find is sort of, I don't know if I can do it without, like, I'm not very good at it. You did it earlier. I should get you up on stage. But anyway, here it is. You can say what you think. Sorry, that's kind of big and bright. But we've been trying to see if some of these expressions are recognized in other cultures as sympathy. So far, even Americans say this is sadness. But I think that in context, so when you're actually talking with someone, it's really hard to capture in a picture, but I think when you're in context with someone and you're talking with them, if you make this expression and mirror to them, they may recognize it as, this person is concerned about me and my welfare. So that's an interesting test. We don't know yet. Okay, so down to the nitty-gritty. We're almost done here. Are compassion and benevolence actually part of human nature? This is a big question in terms of evolution, right? In terms of evolution, altruism is defined as the costs to me are greater than the benefits. If evolution is right, that should be selected against, right? So if I am constantly putting your benefits ahead of my benefits, I should just die out. My genes should not continue, right? It doesn't make any sense. But obviously, we all do feel compassion. We all do help people, even when the costs are greater than the benefits. And the question is why? So there's lots of arguments. One is that first of all, emotions did likely evolve when we were in very small groups. However, these were not just kin groups, so that's something to remember. They could have involved people who were not our kin. However, in terms of kin selection, it makes sense to feel bad for babies when they're suffering, because they're likely our baby, okay? So you don't want them to suffer. If you protect against that, they're more likely to survive and reproduce. Reciprocity is a really interesting part of human nature especially, but also it's been identified in primates and some other species. Feeling compassion for those who are likely to help us in the future is very, very beneficial to us. So if I pick you up when you've fallen, you're going to pick me up when I've fallen, okay? And it makes sense in the long run. And it makes sense especially if we live in small groups, because I'll likely see you again. It doesn't make as much sense in our society, but it makes sense in these smaller societies. Finally, if we live in small groups, I benefit from being in a group. It's much better to live in a big group than it is to live in a little group. We get more resources. If I get sick, there's more people to fall back on. It just makes a lot more sense. So these are three ways that they think compassion has likely been selected for. The last thing is, we're really good at identifying cheaters, or people who are not going to cooperate with us in the future. So we're less likely to feel compassion or kindness, and this is I think what Buddhism is trying to work against, but we're less likely to feel it for people who we don't think will feel it for us. So we don't like to feel compassion for mean people. We don't feel compassion for people who cheated on the exam, right? So, and this has been shown in a lot of different experiments. The interesting thing I think about this is that anger is very, very similar to compassion, at least in terms of situations, right? Because everybody screws up at some point. The question is why? Were you doing it because you wanted to get around the norms, or did you do it by accident? And that will elicit different emotional responses. Okay, so I just want to review a couple of these things. The key aspects of compassion, at least from a Western perspective: A, the person has to suffer. B, you require some level of perspective taking or other focus. You also focus a lot on whether they are responsible or whether they can be blamed for their suffering. And I don't think we have time, unfortunately, but I would like you guys to think a little bit about, like, is this the same as what you're reading about in your readings, or is it something totally different? Yeah. How's being applied? That's a good question. There's different ways. So one is in education. There's been a lot of looking at attributions and how you look at your students' behaviors. There's a long line of research at using, it's very different from this actually, using empathy and sympathy in clinical therapy. So like whether that's a good thing or not. And there's also been some work on policy. So why people choose the public policies they do. But there hasn't been a lot of like intervention work, like how to make people more sympathetic or compassionate. There is work on children, and they find that the way you're socialized as a child has a big effect on it. So if your parents are warm and they teach you how to deal with problems, you are more able to cope with other people's problems, and you're more likely to feel something like sympathy rather than distress. So if you were brought up as a child sort of not able to deal with the problems in your life, especially emotionally, then you respond to other people's emotional suffering very negatively, and you tend to be that person who runs away rather than sticks around and helps. But it's probably something you can learn too if you work at it. Wow. Big question. There is research actually also at UCSF. I just remember I'm looking at meditation specifically, like mindfulness meditation, and some of its positive effects. The other question, I don't think I can answer that in the minute that we have. Yeah. Thank you guys so much.